Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, John Middlekauff, as we usually do on a Sunday night, you hear it Monday or maybe Sunday night. Former NFL scout, 3 announced the podcast, and we chatted up for about 55 minutes to an hour. Let's start with Caitlin Clark. I watched it on a plane. Generally, the great team beats the great player. I think UConn is going to beat Zach Edey. South Carolina's bench at one point had 30 points. Iowa's had none. So the better team, frankly, I thought UConn women were better than Iowa. I thought the last 2 games, Caitlin Clark just kept them close. I've heard Trae Young, she's a better passer than Trae Young. If at this point, even LeBron came on X and said, listen, if you don't like your game, stay away from those people. Those people are crazy people. Between the continuity and chemistry of women's basketball, because they're all coming back, juniors and seniors, the quality of basketball is really good. But the product's good when I watch it.
I thought these last 2 games, and listen, beside a couple of times last year, it's not like I've been glued to Caitlin Clark's season. I was riveted. That UConn game, one, because you think she's going to lose. Clearly, You're playing Gino, an all-time program, and she willed her team to win. Colin, I was tempted. They were a big underdog. I almost gambled on women's college basketball game, and it wasn't going to be a small amount, but obviously South Carolina hadn't lost, and you knew early, you're like, God, this South Carolina team is loaded with athletes. They had 5 new starters from last year. This is like the Alabama of college basketball right now. But she is what I don't understand, and I get it. I defend the guys in the NBA from the 80s and 90s who could be negative toward the newer guys.
Yeah.
They're not talking about Steph Curry and Giannis. They're talking about the percentage of guys making these $200 million contracts that should not be making that. I'd be bitter too if I was them.
Yeah.
You saw a lot of former women's stars come out. It's like, guys, I'm going to pay attention to what she does in the WNBA. Not claiming I'm going to get the WNBA package here,
right?
But she's the first player to get me to pay attention. Obviously, college basketball, women's or men's, their brand, Iowa brand, is infinitely bigger than the WNBA as a whole, right? And so it's hard to compare, but she clearly has transcended it all. And we don't feel and see this that often. Right. Well, it happens every so often, and especially in a sport like women's college basketball, it's cool.
Yeah, Cheryl Miller got 12 million viewers back in '83. I went and looked it up on YouTube. The women's game is much better, but it is a phenomena, and phenomenons don't grow to the sky. Like, the numbers will come back down to earth. The games that get ratings are ones with Caitlin and the game following one with Caitlin, which retains about 60%.
15 million people are watching these women's college basketball games. Yeah. That's an incredible accomplishment.
Yeah, and the quality is just better. But I think Cheryl Miller, I can remember being fascinated with Cheryl Miller. Nancy Lieberman was great, but I don't know if I wasn't fascinated by her. She was just great. But I think Caitlin's got the magic dust, and I don't think you get it very often. I think Michael had it. I think Tiger had it. Tiger changed my viewing habits on Sunday. The Sopranos and Tiger Woods changed my viewing habits. Ohtani, I'll tell you a guy that had it. I don't know how long he had it, but when Jose Canseco, all the steroid rumors came into Major League Baseball, I can remember getting off a plane in San Diego, going down to the luggage carousel, go down the escalator, and everybody's gathered around the bar. And I'm like, what is, more 5 deep at an airport, luggage. Jose Canseco was at the plate. And I can remember going to a Mariners game. I got great seats, like A1, 2, 3, 4. And the A's were in town. Mariner games didn't sell out back then. There were 50,000 people in the ugly Kingdome. So there are, for various reasons, some people are controversial. Conor McGregor, Jose Canseco. But I think she falls under, it's magical. It just doesn't look, she missed a shot today, but she took a step back. I'm like, that's a 28-foot shot. That's Steph and only Steph's range.
Well, I think when Steph did that at Davidson, it was unlike anything we'd ever seen. And obviously he went on to become, a top 10 player of all time. But it was clear, I've never quite seen anything like this. And maybe this has happened in women's college basketball to some form or fashion before. but people weren't watching. Like, that's not being mean or anything. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, this girl got people. And I mean, my mom, I'm driving around today. I see random people walking around with Iowa t-shirts all over Scottsdale.
John,
It's a powerful thing. I mean, I
uh,
don't know what else to say.
yeah, I was flying back from Chicago. So the game started. And then at halftime, that was about the time that I could board the flight. But I was sitting there in the lounge, and I looked over, and every single person was on their phone watching the. And I went to grab something to eat, and I just kind of looked at everybody. Everybody. You don't see that in the NBA playoffs. You see it in the NFL, where I can literally drive down the street in Los Angeles, and if I could see inside houses on a Sunday night or a Saturday night with the NFL playoffs, everybody's watching. Like every television in LA, sometimes a dispassionate football town, everybody's watching. Everybody in the lounge I was in. 2 men, women, young, old. So if it got 24 million people, I would not be shocked.
I think there's something that resonates with people. I mean, Tiger's a good example. I mean, Phil Knight was following his career in high school, right? I mean, Peyton Manning could have gone wherever he wanted in high school. Steph Curry, remember, couldn't even get recruited to his dad's alma mater, Virginia Tech. Now, Caitlin Clark, I think, was a different level high school project, but like Gino wouldn't call her back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, clearly she feels like one of the great girls that would have been at UConn, that would have been at Tennessee under Pat Summitt or at South Carolina, but she ended up at Iowa with, I don't have the scouting report on all the top colleges. It doesn't quite feel like their squad is as good as some of these other squads from a talent standpoint, definitely from a size standpoint. So what she did is just something that we will, however her career goes on from here, it'll be something that no one will ever forget, which is cool. Like, isn't that what sports is about? Having some fun?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's what boxing needs. Boxing's been dying. Ali, Tyson, they just don't have anybody.
No.
And the great male athletes aren't going into boxing. If they want to fight, they go UFC.
For sure.
But it's just you don't get these stories very often. You get them. I mean, I can count 2 hands in my lifetime. I mean, as good as Phil Mickelson is, and he drives me to a TV, but I'm a sportscaster. Tiger was different. I always said my late mother, didn't know sports. She was from Great Britain. She had no idea who Derek Jeter was. She knew who A-Rod was. That's a superstar.
Yeah.
Sports fans, they know who Josh Allen is. My mom knew who Brett Favre was, or Peyton Manning was, or Tom Brady was. There's a big difference between, there's a lot of good basketball. Sue Bird. I mean, there's been like dominant players before.
For sure.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, Caitlin Clark's different. That's a comment. That's a whole different ballgame. So it's one thing to see Caitlin Clark and women's basketball driving numbers. It's another when the men are getting pretty good numbers. And they're not getting like Caitlin Clark numbers, but the March Madness for the men, you're not getting the continuity or the chemistry. Zach Edey was not changing channels last year. UConn is the most anonymous great program in the country's history. They've had multiple coaches, Kevin Ali, Jim Calhoun, Dan Hurley. They don't have one Coach K. And I was thinking about this. I've gone back and forth on, I understand the Caitlin Clark number, but the college basketball number is maintaining its strength this year. And I thought, well, we have legalized gambling in more and more states. That's something. There's more and more people gambling on these games. It's not a quality argument. Women's is a quality and icon argument. Yeah, Caitlin's an icon. The quality's better. Men's college basketball quality is not very good. And there's no Zach Edey's a 7'4" guy. He's not going to sell shoes like Caitlin Clark. And a lot of it is, I think, is that we like basketball in this country. We like Olympic basketball. We like women's now. We've always, Magic, Steph, Michael, there's been iconic players. And we always like men's March Madness. But I do think, for a variety of reasons, the NBA feels like it's just not it. There's not a lot of these stars, Jokic, Giannis, they're not real embraceable. They're just gifted. They're just fantastic players. And, LeBron, there's a LeBron fatigue, John. I mean, let's be honest. We've watched it.
We've been in the league 21 years.
Yeah, there's a LeBron fatigue, and I love LeBron. Also, Steph's on a average team. I mean, they're slightly better than average. And New York, I watched them Friday night. Chicago, they're going nowhere. So I think it'd be one thing if there were these riveting, compelling NBA stories. Kevin Durant's great, but he's never been somebody like we get up and cheer for. He's a wanderer. He's sort of his own cat. He's a different dude. And I think to myself, we want basketball. Like, we love football so much now that we need a little break. And the NFL draft will come pouring in. The country's looking for basketball. And I'm an NBA fan, but it just feels like it's that Spurs dynasty where it's like, I'm not in love with anybody.
I think this gets back to the way society is in 24, our options. And the women's tournament felt really big. It did. I mean, her last 3 games, from the Elite Eight to the Final Four to the championship game, but you just couldn't miss if you like sports. March Madness does and continue. It is a big event.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to see the Masters this weekend. Even with the split of golf, like, people are going to pay attention. Why? It's a big event. And I think the NBA, 2 things. One, the brands, like, Jokic is he's one of the greatest players I've ever seen. The Nuggets, no one has. You say the Nuggets, no one cares.
Yeah.
Even
OKC.
the Mavs, the Clippers, OKC, these brands.
Yeah.
It's just, that's where the Warriors and Lakers, the Warriors are going to be the 10 seed. They easily could be one and done.
Yeah.
The Lakers actually probably should win a game and be a factor. That'll be big for the NBA. And like you said, I mean, the Knicks now with Julius Randle being injured, they're not going anywhere. The Celtics could just run through the East. I do think it just doesn't feel that big. Like, I kind of just pay attention to the Dodgers because I just know they're big and important. Like, what's Ohtani and Mookie Betts doing today? Yep. And I've kind of changed the way, like, I watch less and less NBA basketball, definitely. And I just focus on big things, right? And I just pay attention to the things that matter. I'm not a huge UFC guy, but like, when Conor McGregor, his next fight, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to watch it because I feel like I can. Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, I'm not going to miss it. And neither are most people in my life. Well, but a lot of people aren't going to watch the first round of the NBA. I'll promise you that.
Yeah. And college football this year ratings, Michigan and Harbaugh felt huge. There was massive Bama fatigue, Georgia fatigue. Harbaugh was controversial. Their numbers were unbelievable.
He got suspended twice in the season, beginning and end.
If you look at what's happened to society since the iPhone came around, we are so distracted. Regular seasons in hockey, baseball, and the NBA. If you don't have a star, people aren't interested. They just move on to other shit. My wife's on TikTok for an hour every morning. I'm sitting there. She'll go to CNN. She'll play Wordle. She'll go CNN. And then she's on TikTok for 45 minutes having a coffee. And I'm going through sports stuff. And it's just like, I think in a distracted market, Ohtani feels big. UFC 300 doesn't have a superstar, but it's got 12 champions or former champions. It'll get talked about this weekend. Caitlin Clark felt big. And I think to your point, Zach Edey and Purdue is a Big Ten team in the final. That feels big. The Big Ten's always been a ratings monster when they get a great team.
I think the brands, I was texting with a buddy who played golf at Oregon, who now works in the golf industry, and he's just like, can't wait for the schedule to come out. I mean, the games that are going to be played in football, and that only benefits. I'll never forget Calipari. I was watching an interview. He's like, I'm the Wildcats' biggest football fan. The better they do, the more money for us. I'm not an idiot. We may be a basketball school, but I want the football program to be good. Stoops wins. We all make money. We all benefit. And I think the explosion of college football and just football in general has benefited the brands in college basketball, because the casual fan, I would fall under that. And I'm a high-end sports fan. I don't know these players in men's college basketball. And I've been watching men's college basketball for 30 years. But I know all the schools, and the schools draw me. And that's why it was pretty easy to watch the women's tournament. Like, I knew Caitlin Clark, didn't know anyone else. But I know South Carolina. I can name 15 NFL guys. Steve Spurrier. I feel I recognize the brand. That's the one thing in the NBA. Like, I care nothing about the Clippers. They do nothing for me. Yeah. I mean, and their players don't. It doesn't. That's one thing the NBA really battles is the brands, and I do think it's turned a lot of people off over the last couple of years with the effort and
the load management stuff is horse shit. I hate it.
It's one of the worst business decisions. David Stern would never. You talk shit about him all you want. That's something that would have flown, because it hurt your consumer, and you're only as strong. The reason we talk about these ratings, I mean, that's where all the money comes from. That's the health of the business, right?
Well, I watched Friday night Bulls Knicks. If Julius Randle, who's a B-level player, is in that game, it feels bigger. It didn't feel as big. It was Jalen Brunson and a bunch of guys, and then it was DeMar DeRozan and kind of a bunch of guys. If Julius Randle, just one more guy was on the floor, the game would have felt bigger. Knicks would have probably been able to win the game. So, yeah, and I also feel the NBA, it's interesting. So the NFL media is critical of the NFL. College football media is critical. Baseball media can be harsh. The NBA is different. There's about 6 players that matter, 2, 3 agents that matter. It's a lot of cushy, soft reporting. And so instead of banging on these guys for load management, we bang on
It was celebrated, a lot of it,
a
honestly.
lot of it. And now data's come out and said, guys, it doesn't make you healthier. It doesn't. There's no data that says you're being healthy. So I think what has happened is load management ticks off fans, but the media has to protect their sourcing on the NBA. Because in the NBA, it's one thing in baseball. If you cover baseball, you get around the batting cage. There's no team or you just you don't need any one team or player.
Yeah.
Same in the NFL, unless you're like the Chiefs beat writer Mahomes. But in basketball, you need LeBron and Rich Paul and his 7 clients. And if you start ticking them off, you may not get them.
They cut you off.
They cut you off. And so I look at load management. I'm like, it's really, and again, a lot of people out there just don't like the NBA. I do. This is my 3rd game this year in person. I get the NBA package. I watch it constantly. So I think it hurts it. The other thing I was thinking about this weekend, we'll segue back to football, is that when Belichick got let go, it's a little like John Calipari. The culture changes and you kind of dig your feet in. Calipari said, this is who I am. Calipari's rumored to be going to Arkansas, by the way. There's a big rumor tonight he's going to Arkansas. And he would take the Kentucky money, they'd have to pay him out, and he'd get the Arkansas money. He'd be making, the guy could make $25 million a year or something. So whether or not that comes to fruition, Calipari to Arkansas, because Musselman took the USC job.
USC job, yeah.
But it's interesting. So they're basically the same. The world changes for football. After they wrote the $1 billion check for CTE, NFL's like, we're cleaning this game up. It's all offense. They pivoted exit stage right on all those defensive stuff you could do. And so the game changed. It benefited now Andy Reid and not Pete Carroll, Mike Tomlin, Belichick. College basketball, the one and done thing. You can't win with freshmen. If the teams that are winning in this tournament are junior, senior laden, it's 22-year-olds. And in both instances, Belichick's like, this is what I do. Look at my rings. Calipari was quoted as saying, I don't know if I can change. And I'm like, John, you can't not win in March. The world changes and you dig your feet in. If Calipari leaves Kentucky, because I'm watching Belichick in Husky gear, Belichick is cemented. He's a top 3 coach ever. If Calipari leaves Kentucky, don't I think you failed? You failed. That you didn't win.
I was hanging out with a buddy yesterday who's from the SEC, and he went to Arkansas. And one of the things, I mean, they have a lot of money at that program.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of money. And there were rumors. He's like, the one thing people started noticing in the middle of the season, Musselman's wife stopped sitting next to a couple of the big money people, and they knew there were some rifts. And, he was going to go somewhere, whether it was Louisville or USC. We were talking about how Calipari brags that he has $3 billion worth of NBA contracts, right? That's always been his thing. Look at it. Yeah. It's like, John, these guys spent 3 months with you. Anthony Davis was getting $500 million in the NBA, whether Colin Cowherd, John Middlekauff, or John Calipari coached them.
Right.
I mean, the majority of your players, what are we talking about?
Right.
And to me, it just, I think it gets back to the power of the money down there and the pressure of the cash flowing into these programs in basketball and football. And if Arkansas, if it pulls this off, because my guy thought it was going to be Chris Beard, remember, got fired from Texas, was at Ole Miss, who was a couple years ago was viewed as like a rocket ship and had that incident with his, I don't know if she's his ex-wife now, but got fired. And turns out it wasn't as bad. But they will cut enormous check. I mean, we're talking they'll $50 million and not even blink. So listen, I think he's a tad bit overrated. I mean, the tournament's a little weird, right? When I lived in Philadelphia, around the tournament time, Jay Wright was obviously close with Andy. Everyone was rooting for him. And I remember they were losing early. And this is in the early 2010s. And they could not advance in the tournament. And finally he turns and we all acknowledge he's one of the best coaches of the last several decades. Tournament's weird. But to lose consistently in his situation
Peters
to Oakland, I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit, maybe I'm just over it. I'm leaving. I'm going to go to someone who will like me. Sometimes you just, you break up with someone, you leave a company because someone else is showing you a little bit more love. You're tired of, let's face it, Kentucky basketball, Alabama football. I would imagine North Carolina basketball, LSU football. It's a different beast. It's the pressure, and if you're not getting it done, once they start paying you a lot and you're hanging your hat on a championship from 2010 or 11, it's 2024, right? So
Musselman, apparently, I was told his wife, Danielle, Musselman ticked off one of the boosters. It wasn't Tyson's Foods. The Tyson Foods is one of
he's
the
a big money guy. Yeah.
But it was somebody else. There's a third sponsor there. And I was told that Musselman's intense. He's not for everybody. I know Jen Cohen very well. She wanted somebody that was, a grinder and was really about basketball. And I think she got it. Tom Crean is Jim Harbaugh texted me. A lot of people were in the Tom Crean corner. They really, really like Tom. I thought Tom would have been a fine choice, but I think Musselman's a good choice. But it'll be interesting with Calipari because it would be like Nick Saban was winning natties every other year, and Calipari was getting dusted every other year in the tournament. And those were the two programs of note, Bama football and Kentucky basketball. And I could argue it's easier in basketball because if you have one or two NBA players, you're going to run through a conference.
I think the hard part about basketball relative to football, he just had the equivalent of a 10-2 or 11-1 year season, but you get bounced in the first round, and it is just it equals all your games from the regular season. Where in college football, well, it's going to change now with the expanded playoff. But if you lost in the Final Four, it was still a very successful season, right? But I do think, and you're going to see it this year in college football, Brian Kelly, who just might have the number 2 pick in the draft, they had an incredible. They went 9-3. And they lost to Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. It's not going to fly down there for a long time. But I mean, we've seen it. We're Jim McElwain guys. Once that snowball of negativity, they start coming for you. Whether it's fair or not, there is no stopping it. And I would say Kentucky basketball is probably the closest thing in hoops, wouldn't you say, to Alabama, LSU football,
Absolutely.
kind of that.
Oh, they're gorgeous arena. It's like North Carolina and Kentucky. It's the revenue, the facilities. I look at Calipari. My knock on him was I used to joke Caliponzi. I'm like, okay, I get the one and done scheme. It's not working anymore. Let's get juniors and seniors.
But if you and I were an AD, who would you rather be in business with? Jay Wright, Bill Self. I mean, you start going to the other 5 guys.
There's not many.
Dan Hurley. You would choose them all over Calipari.
Well,
where even when Saban was a pain in your ass, everyone's like, well, I'd go with Nick, right? It'd be a no-brainer. You don't say that about Calipari.
Yeah, and a lot of time, Mark Few's not going to go there. So a lot of the college basketball coaches, like Jay Wright, was not leaving Villanova. Mark Few is not leaving Gonzaga. UCLA's offered him the job twice and Oregon once.
Self ain't leaving Kansas.
Nope. So what happens in college basketball more than these football coaches will bounce anywhere, but in college basketball, these guys that are they know they're getting into the tournament every year, like Boeheim. You got it kind of baked in. You're getting into the tournament. Yeah. In college football, you can have a hell of a season. You're Alabama, you lose to Georgia. You're not in the tournament, and you're getting. Remember the time he lost to Auburn, he had to go to Texas because his boosters were like, Nick, I don't know if it's working. You're like, I got 3 titles. What are you doing? Basketball guys will stay, so you're not going to get Jay Wright or Bill Self or Mark Few. They're not leaving. They're getting into the tournament every year, and they like their wives like it. They've got a social circle, so I understand that for Calipari. I do think he's a good coach, but the Kentucky thing, if he leaves, is very interesting because he doesn't want to budge on that one and done stuff. That's his thing. And by the way,
it's easier, right? Wouldn't you say it's easier?
Well,
they're in, they're out. You don't have to develop.
It's the old inner scoreboard, outer scoreboard. A lot of guys talk shit, but do you really have confidence? If you really trust your coaching, like Jay Wright trusts his coaching, he gets 3-star guys and develops them.
Dan Hurley.
They know they're good coaches. Does Calipari have self-doubt and think, I just need better dudes? Because name a coach in any sport that has ever said, I'm willing to give up complete continuity. No coach likes that. There's not a high school coach. There's no coach in the history of any sport that says, I want a revolving door of players. Calipari is doing it because my take is deep down, he questions his coaching. No coach wants to cycle through players every year.
He runs the most expensive AAU program in the country, essentially.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
I don't know what they generate, probably $100 million. He's what he's running. Where you watch Purdue or Dan Hurley, they're running a college basketball program. He's running like a bed and breakfast. You're in and you're out.
All right, the NBA season is in full swing, coming down the stretch. Then we move right into the playoffs in April, May, and June. I can't wait. Spice things up with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA right now. All you have to do is put down $5 and get $150 instantly in bonus bets. Pretty good trade-off. I pay $5, I get $150. North Carolina listeners, do not forget. Welcome to the party. DraftKings Sportsbook now live in your state, North Carolina. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Takes 90 seconds. The code is Colin, Colin. Again, 90 seconds. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app. Put in Colin. New customers bet $5, get $150 back in bonus bets instantly. That is the trade. All right. The code is always Colin. The crown is yours. I feel with some confidence that the first two players picked in this draft are going to be Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels. Based on what I'm hearing on Jayden Daniels' playing style and Cliff Kingsbury's history, that Washington thinks that's a better fit for the current staff. And they also believe Jayden Daniels' ability, and you've seen this, to move buys you a couple of years of figuring out complex NFL defenses. We saw it with Lamar, which Jalen Hurts, where you run around for Russell Wilson. You run around for a couple years until you kind of figure out Josh Allen. It's like I'm gonna run around for a couple years on 3rd and 6, and it buys you drives, it buys you wins, buys you time to figure out complex defenses. Most quarterbacks say in year 3. Mahomes, I think, said beginning of year 3, everything slowed down. I get it now. So this is what I'm hearing, that if I asked 2 executives in the league, they said their feeling was Caleb 1, Jayden Daniels 2, Drake May's inconsistency scares them. But if you go back a year to hit a year's
ago, he was good 2 years ago. Yeah.
If you go back to it, it's a lot like Jordan Love. There's a lot to like. If you go back to the previous year, he ran for 600-700 yards, anticipatory throws. Sometimes you lose a coordinator, a left tackle, an NFL receiver, whatever it is. Jordan Love lost a lot of people. Good junior tape or sophomore tape, bad junior tape. So anyway, Cliff Kingsbury, Jayden Daniels is what I'm hearing.
I think 2 things can be true. I think Caleb's in his own universe in this class.
Yeah.
So whoever goes 2, it's hard to make an argument that they made the wrong decision. Right? Because like you said, Drake kind of fell off this year. Jayden Daniels, somewhat of a one-year wonder. J.J. McCarthy, his statistical profile, the way what he's been asked to do is they could win games with him throwing 9 attempts a game. It was like Jimmy Garoppolo 2019 against the Packers.
Yeah.
I do think, though, in knowing Adam Peters, and this is why it's kind of been a little cloak and dagger, he's kind of from the Belichick. He's not a big talker to the media, letting know what's going on. Obviously, he's worked at places that are very beholden to the head coach, and it's smart to give the head coach and the operation who you want. But Cliff Kingsbury, if they were to have success, like, he could get a college job. Like, so anytime you draft because of your coordinator, it's one thing if you draft. If Sean McVay's like, let's take Michael Penix in the first round. Why no? As long as Sean McVay's there, he's the guy calling the plays. Or LaFleur or Kyle or Andy. But, like, is Cliff Kingsbury, if they have success, guaranteed to be there? I always find that their head coach is a defensive guy, and we've seen before he's very predicated. His success was on Kyle, and then they had a little success with Sark, and then it kind of fell apart once they all left. So I think you should take whoever you feel the best player is, and it's hard if you throw on just go to YouTube, watch Jayden Daniels And Malik Neighbors, he's really good. I mean, there's no disputing. He's got a big-time arm. He's obviously an elite athlete. He's accurate down the field. The knock is size, weight, that being, not height.
Yeah.
But the way he plays, he's one of Lamar's great attributes is he doesn't take big hits.
Yeah.
Michael Vick was kind of the opposite. He kind of took on. Jayden takes that on. And in the NFL, this might not be 1983, but you still get hit hard.
But if Dan Quinn says, Cliff, I'm gonna give you a lot of say in this, and Cliff, let's just say it's selfish, says, well, I've had the Jayden Daniels style before. I can win with that style.
Yeah, he knows he can.
Yeah, so I could see Dan relinquishing some to Adam and Cliff and saying, okay, you guys, I want input. And Cliff saying, well, I've worked with that before. The Jayden thing I can use, I can do. I'm just told that style, Kingsbury, Jayden Daniels, right now, that's the feeling that that's where they're going.
I was talking to a buddy who's a high up guy with a team that does not need a quarterback. And his comment was, after Caleb Williams, I'm glad I'm not in that business because it's just not that. I mean, all these guys are talented. Like I'm even pro JJ McCarthy because my comp to him is a little Alex Smith. Yeah. Clearly, he's a high level guy, physical attributes. He goes to the right place. He can have success. But the history shows more than half of these guys fail.
Right.
And it's an overwhelming position. Even these guys coming from LSU, Michigan, these big, even North Carolina, it's a whole different ball game now. The popularity of the NFL, the pressure of the NFL. You've talked about it. By the second Thanksgiving, it's like either shit or get off the pot here. So it's pedal to the metal. Money doesn't matter anymore. We can pay you to leave. We'll cut you. I mean, the Jets, there's a decent chance the Jets cut Zach Wilson. Clearly, they're hoping to trade him.
Well,
no one's trading for an $8 million backup that can't play.
Well, this is one of the most circumstantial drafts I remember. And I'll give you a team. The New York Giants. I was told this 2 days ago by a higher up in the NFL in a front office. He said, take a look at the New York Giants. He goes, if Jayden Daniels or Drake May fall, they will take them.
Yeah.
They're not moving up. They don't want to give up draft capital. They're stuck with Daniel Jones. But they could either take Jayden Daniels or Drake May. This executive said that would make a lot of sense if they fell to you. If they don't, they would also potentially take a star receiver if Harrison or Neighbors is available. Or they look at it and think, oh, those two receivers are now both gone. The Chargers can't get out of 5. They take, Harrison goes to Arizona. The Chargers can't move back. They take a receiver, which they need, and the Giants trade down. And this executive said, the Giants are a great example of you can do a million mock drafts. It's going to depend on what happens above them, because his take is it's really rich. When you have an average roster and the Giants' offensive roster is below average.
Below. Now Saquon gone for sure.
You cannot give up multiple firsts. Like, you need hits. And the safest hits in this draft, in any draft, is a first-round pick in the top 12. So this person was just saying the Giants are a classic example. They'll take a quarterback if they fall. Probably won't, but they would. They'll take a receiver if the Chargers don't. They'll move down potentially. And he said this draft is going to be outside of the top couple of picks. He said Washington and Chicago aren't moving. After that, it's all circumstantial. It's if Minnesota goes hyper aggressive, he goes, the other thing he says, keep your eye on Denver. Everybody's talking about falling back. He said, if you like Bo Nix and the Raiders jump ahead of you 2 spots, and these quarterbacks start drying up, McCarthy, you got 4 of them gone, and you're not into Penix, which if you look at Peyton's offense, Penix isn't a good fit. So I think we're just going to have kind of a wild draft. I do think there's going to be multiple teams trading down, and I can't wait for it.
Well, to me, the visits that you see come across the wire, like so-and-so visited a team, random guys, sometimes it can be smoke screens or whatever. But when you see the top 10 guys, when like all the receivers are going to meet Harbaugh, when all the receivers are going to New York, when Penix and Bo Nix are going to the Raiders and going to Denver, those are enormous job interviews, right? I mean, there's already been parts of the job interview, but that's sitting down with the owner, eating a meal, spending time with the entire staff for large portions of a day. You feel one way or another when that guy leaves because you already know him as a player. So it's like, do I trust this guy? And that can be the swing for a lot of these guys. Right? Because this does not feel like a draft, like you said, where anyone's hiding anything. We all know who needs the receivers. We know who needs the quarterbacks. The Dayball thing, though, after his first year, it's hard not to go, God, this guy's a star. What he did with a pretty average roster. Last year was pretty embarrassing.
Yeah.
Right. They doubled down on Daniel Jones. It was immediately ugly. The coaches weren't getting along. It's pretty embarrassing. It's not something that the old school owner likes. There's pressure. He can't just have another crappy season and everything be kumbaya, especially the Cowboys and the Eagles are having. Now Washington starts trending up. You got McVay and Shanahan crushing. Packers are good. It's like, what the hell are the Giants doing? Getting lapped in obscurity and embarrassment. So I would imagine if you're Dable, you want players. You don't want a quarterback, right? Because if you get a rookie quarterback, the guy comes in maybe by late October, you're already kind of bad. Your offensive weapons suck. And then you're going to want one of those wide receivers, maybe the second round, take another offensive weapon and try to be competitive this year. Now that's where in the NFL, sometimes these teams coming off bad years, the coach and the front office and the ownership can have different visions. And that's where things can get weird. So if I was Dable, I would not want a quarterback because there's no guarantee I'm lasting 4 years. The Giants ran through like 3 coaches in 6 years.
When you as we get ready for the draft in a couple of weeks, when you were with the Eagles, from what I can tell is people are scouting up until the draft. Like you just keep scouting, you keep digging, you keep getting reports, and shit. There are teams that will 2 days before the draft, they just won't like something they hear. I mean,
Yeah.
give me your insight on a player, a year where you felt like it was up to the draft. People were still looking for information.
Well, I just think anytime there are question marks off the field, and I think around this time of year, you and I have been talking about it forever, the media can be so disingenuous. Like not everyone's a criminal, but people have questionable off the field.
The Texas
decisions.
defensive tackle just got a
DUI. Well, think about that. And I looked right before we hopped on. From what I read, he was arrested at I think around lunchtime. Like to me, it's like, what's this guy drinking in the morning? I mean, it'd be one thing. Like, was he playing golf with his buddies or was he just at a bar with some people? What the hell's going on? That's a good example. Most people I know, if they didn't start last week, you right up until pro days, that ends and you've accumulated all the information and then you go to meetings. And now a lot of these meetings I think are kind of hybrid Zoom and guys come in, the high-end guys come in, the other guys are on Zoom. And a lot of it is not going out, over like how much they can bend, how strong they are at this point. It's what is this kid's deal, especially with a top, I would say 75 pick, right? Guy that you would invest a first 2-day pick in. Obviously the top guys, you're a very, very fine-tooth comb, but even a second rounder, I mean, that could change your franchise if it's AJ Brown or Deebo Samuel or Nick Chubb or whoever. I mean, but you better know the person. So it's easy when a guy gets a DUI because it's like, okay, we got to really, are we sure we trust this guy? I think it's a lot harder when it's like, well, hey, I've talked to some of his teachers or his academic advisor, and they just don't really trust him. Or sometimes it's the opposite. Like a coach can have a bad experience with a player. We're all humans. You just don't like guys more than other guys. But then the people that you've trusted, that you've developed relationships in the program, swear by them. So you really try to figure that out. And this is why you're not drafting widgets. You're drafting humans. And everyone has a different opinion on every single person. How many people do you meet that someone's like, oh, that guy's a dick. And then you meet him, you're like, oh, I kind of like the guy.
Right.
Or vice versa. You're like, I didn't really like the guy, but someone is like, I'm really close friends with him. We all have individual interactions with people.
And biases.
The one thing, yeah, and the thing with football now, which makes it hard, and my scouting buddies that I didn't have to deal with, is the transfer portal. So it's like, you're at Texas one day and you're like, I should ask that coach because he was with this kid at Washington who now transferred to Florida. But that's hard too, because usually when a guy transfers, it's like, he's kind of a diva. He wouldn't listen. But then he goes to the other program and people love him.
Right.
So that balancing act, I actually think it's probably more difficult trying to keep up with that because usually Bo Nix is a good example. Like Michael Penix just transferred because his coach went there. It wasn't that crazy. Bo Nix had a bad experience at Auburn. And then he goes to Oregon and has an incredible experience. So maybe if you're around some of the people at Auburn, their experience around him wasn't great. I don't know that. I'm just saying, using this as an example. You're not going to hear a negative thing at Oregon about the guy.
They loved him.
Right? So you try to balance that, and you can just go, well, he's matured. He's got to a good place. Put him around the right people. So that can make it difficult. And you got to be careful with the head coaches. because the head coaches have an agenda. The higher their guys get drafted, the more they can put them up on the boards, when you enter the program and the recruits come in. You got to get with the assistant coaches, the graduate assistants, the people off the field. And that just takes years of knowing who you can trust and who you can't, because most of these guys that are drafted high have the talent to play in the NFL. What separates them is all the off the field stuff, right? The character, the work ethic. Football sucks beside the games.
Yeah.
You lift really hard, you train really hard, you get screamed at nonstop in a meeting. You don't show up to work at noon. I mean, you're getting there bright and early. You don't leave late. You play once a week, and it's only in the fall. Well, you're still like Harbaugh. The Chargers are having practice right now. They're doing OTAs. Like it's a lot of work, and it separates the men from the boys mentally. So that to me, those conversations are just nonstop in these meetings about the kid, what drives him, how he's wired, and you're just trying to figure out to make the best educated guess humanly possible, because that's ultimately what you're doing. You're getting a 20 to 22-year-old who a lot of guys grow. Tyrann Mathieu was kicked off his college team. LSU kicked him off. He's been a team captain of 4 different teams. So it's like, but you got to be careful. Like that could be an outlier situation. It's like, well, this guy could be the next Josh Allen, or he could be the next Trey Lance. So this is always a fascinating time of year, because within 6 months, mid-season, you're like, God, I regret this one. Or, God, love this. We got lucky on this. You're just trying to mitigate all the potential landmines and take the best educated guess with all the information possible.
So I want to talk about this. I'm taking my wife to UFC 300, which is probably
Where is it?
It's in Vegas. I think there's 12 current or former champions. Great undercard. It's a stacked. I mean, it's 300. They stacked it. Dana White stacked it.
Dana's got it rolling.
Yeah, he does. Know Dana well, like Dana. Doesn't take anybody's crap. I mean, basically leased an island during COVID. I love that.
Yeah, badass.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So I was telling somebody this the other day. You could not get my wife to a baseball game. She's not going to a football game. NBA and UFC, they're events. Loves going to NBA games, and I've taken her to UFC, and she likes fights. And you have a girlfriend. I don't know if she's a sports fan, but I was telling a buddy about this. I said, my wife's not a sports fan. She's an event fan. So if it was a daredevil, a hysterical magician, a singing act, UFC it's crazy. Like Trump will probably walk in, the place erupts, it's nuts, there's movie stars, and she likes the spectacle of it all. Plus, I mean, the UFC fights are like, they're jarring to watch. I mean, you're getting guys that are kicking what out of each other. Do you and I've said before, UFC's in my top 5. World Cup, NFL, college football, UFC. I would say March Madness rekindled my interest this year. I've had a blast watching more. I kind of had 2 or 3 years with the men's game. I thought was too diluted, too many transfers. I've loved men's and women's this year. Where does UFC rank for you? And by the way, if your girlfriend could choose, all right, John, we're going to this, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, she's a huge 49er fan. She loves football. I mean, she follows the 49ers. I mean, every player very closely. I mean, she hasn't missed a snap since I've met her. And she grew up, I mean, in Northern California. Her dad was a big 49er fan. And that's, I think she represents a lot of people. We talk about this a lot, the female fan base that the NFL has now.
Huge.
It's not just like someone's wife watching the games. Like, no, they're a fan of the Bills.
It's like 50% of the fan base.
Yeah. When I went to Cal Poly, where Chuck Liddell went, and my first couple years there, Chuck was becoming a star, and he also trained there. So it was a really, really big deal. And Chad Mendez, who ended up fighting Conor McGregor, was my college roommates. They lived in the dorms together, and I watched him beat the shit out of some people at a party. And I had never been around wrestlers in high school. And then Cal Poly, I wouldn't put him in like Iowa or Penn State, but Chad ended up being like the runner-up for the national championship his senior year. Had some good wrestlers. Chuck wrestled there once upon a time. And I just remember thinking, these guys are crazy. They were insane. And it was just in following Chad Mendez's career. He fought Conor, he fought Aldo, and he didn't win, but he's the toughest guy I've ever seen. He weighs 155 pounds. I mean, he could beat up I mean, he could handle Aaron Donald. I'm not saying he'd win the fight, but he wouldn't hesitate. These guys, the respect I have for never being around these guys and then watching them just in a fist fight at a party take down 10 people before you could blink. And I have, listen, you get in that octagon, you are such a badass. I watched the last fight because I started doing CrossFit a couple days a week. I haven't done it in a while, but Sugar Sean was working out at that gym. And so I was like, oh, this guy, pink hair. So I ordered the fight when he fought last time, and it was excellent. I mean, he was just like, God, this guy's a fucking badass.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. I just like, I'm not like a fight diehard, but I have nothing but appreciation because I've seen it firsthand, the level of craziness that it takes and how talented these guys, the training levels of when these guys are preparing for a fight, right? It's
insane. And, what's interesting about UFC is, you always knew the top fighters, made a fortune. The promoters made a lot of money. And in the end, it was like the sport didn't have a central figure like Dana White. And, whenever
they remember they battled a lot of the political wins. I was just talking about this on the golf course. John McCain was pushing back against, I remember being like junior high and they couldn't do it. And they tried to do it in San Jose. I remember in like the late 90s and got in trouble. But McCain was like the driving force. Like, this is barbaric. Remember that? And they just couldn't get, and then they finally somehow crossed that threshold and they've never looked back.
Well, I mean, we have, we have a rich history of boxing in this country and fighting in this country. And I think one of the things that Dana did very quickly to get in the Budweisers and the big brands was they had to clean it up about 20 years ago. They cleaned that. There's eye gouging and shit. They got out of that stuff. Dana very smartly said, listen, we want our guys are tough. We don't want their eyes getting gouged out. We need them, 9 weeks later to be in another fight. I think they cleaned it up. And then I just think you have to be forceful. I mean, running the volume every day is a challenge. You got to be forceful. You got to have a plan of attack. And I think if you look at what has hurt college football, the quality of the product is great. There's no leadership. Boxing. There's no leadership. And so when you look at sports, Roger Goodell, I've been saying this forever. There's something about media doesn't like people that don't need them. Roger Goodell and the NFL do not need newspapers. They do not need radio guys. They don't even barely need TV networks now with streaming. Is the NFL has almost no missteps. It's just really well run. They've made their schedule release a day. The combine is effective. Like they have done the best. And now they've said to the NBA, no, we're going to knock you off Christmas. We're going to take your ratings there.
Can we talk about something a little inside baseball with the NFL that they clearly just laid off a lot of people and that they are trimming down what they do. And the media's take is consistently, this business is making so much money.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Yet I'm someone who literally makes a living off the NFL, who couldn't follow it any more closely. And I never watch NFL Network. So just because your business of the games, and one thing I've noticed at the gym I go to, they have 10 TVs and one's always on Fox News, the other's on CNN, the other's on ESPN, the other's on Fox Sports, the other's on NFL Network. The only thing NFL Network now is playing is just games. Like I went this afternoon and I looked up and it was the Colts Rams game from earlier this year, overtime game, and they're just replaying it. They're probably getting the same rating. So it's like, just because the WNBA, I don't know if they make money now, never made any money. The NBA just subsidized them forever. Right. Like the NFL, just because the games are making money, the other entities, they shouldn't just, if it's not working, people don't watch NFL Network.
NFL Network has been.
It doesn't mean they don't have talented people or whatever working for the network, but it's not making any money.
That thing's been up for sale for 7 years. They've been trying to sell that thing. I know somebody inside NBA TV. That's dead.
Nobody watches that.
Nobody watches. Now, MLB Network is different because shows like mine, ESPN, Fox, we don't talk baseball. So the discussions you have on the MLB Network are unique. Nobody else is having them.
Golf Channel worked.
Yep. And so NBA and NFL Network, all those debates, they're on television all day. There's too much duplication. And then, I mean, listen, I don't watch the NFL Network. I think I know Peter Schrager very, very well.
Same. I like those guys. They're good.
But when you move a show to the West Coast, you can't do a morning show out West, an effective morning show, because you can't. When I came from ESPN to Fox and they asked me what time, I was asked by my radio network, my TV network, what time do you want to do? You pick the time slot. And I said, well, I can't do anything earlier than 9 a.m. Pacific, which is noon Eastern. I said, because I can't ask my staff to get up at 2:50. And in Los Angeles, in New York, a lot of people come down a building and walk to work. In Los Angeles, everybody drives to work. So I have to, if you need to be there in my show right now, you have to be there about 5:55 to 6. I get there about 6:10. Staff gets there about maybe 6 to 6. We all get in at the same time. If I was doing, meaning they have to get up probably at 5-ish, shower, 35-minute drive. That's reasonable. You get into 3:45, people have to get up. You can't get a staff. So
if I was a betting man, the NFL Network will not have a morning show in the fall. They will just show replays of games. That would be my guess.
There's no way if I live out east and you move the show and you're asking me to get up at 3:45, it's like, I'm out. It's nothing against the people. It's like, they're just doing that as a cost-saving move. And it's not a knock on the people. I mean, I know Eisen, I know Schrager really well, but it's like these people get caught up in, they just tend to forget, is that once there's duplication and you're not special, all these sports created these networks, but nobody talks hockey except the NHL network. Nobody talks baseball on a syndicated national level, except like local stations in the MLB network. Guys like me, Stephen A. Skip, doesn't matter who it is, ESPN, Fox all day. We talk NFL and NBA. You don't need the networks. They're dead. Nothing against anybody. So, and listen, even at the volume, we're doing very well. You're always looking for ways to put your best people on your best shows to make sure you have the most efficiency. I'm not blaming anybody for it. I just know the NFL Network's been for sale for like 7 years. It's quietly been, anybody want it? There's no takers.
No. Can I give you a theory I had on what the Dolphins should do after what just happened? So the Bills, who I've said the overreaction that they're just going to suck, which maybe they take a huge step back, but they'll
be fine. Yeah,
by far have the best quarterback, who to me is the second best quarterback in the league, and clearly one of the great quarterbacks we've seen in recent memory, talent-wise.
Yeah.
The Dolphins have a big question mark with their quarterback, who's turned out to be solid, but in the biggest moments these last couple of years has crumbled like a cookie.
Yeah.
And this year, I remember talking to Veach and Andy at the Combine, and they said, and Veach specifically said, when you walked out on that playoff game, he's like, that's the coldest thing I've ever encountered. I was even nervous just for my own guys, even though I knew we had Mahomes versus them, but I was like, God, and it wasn't even close. And they had no shot, the Dolphins. So now, before you give a guy a couple $100 million, wouldn't you go, no excuses now? Belichick's with his kid in Seattle. You got, who knows what New England's doing. The Jets, I mean, are 3 pulled hamstrings and Achilles from being everyone getting fired. And the Bills lost a lot of talent. So they just have, if we can't do it this year, I mean, we just had, it felt like a 20-game lead halfway through the season, and then somehow we didn't win the division and they did. If we can't win it this year, we can't pay this guy. And then that means a home playoff game. We should win a playoff game. Wouldn't you just play this year out? You're already under the cap. Like, he's already, his money's his money this year. Why pay him this year? Let's kind of do a prove it year, a little Flacco style almost.
Dak and Tua, in my opinion, will be available on the market potentially next year. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean,
I would not pay Tua right now, given everything that just happened with the AFC.
I wouldn't pay Dak. If you start,
I think they're hesitant to do that. Clearly,
yeah. So I think Tua is going to be on the market next year. By the way, there's going to be a Kirk Cousins level guy in the market. 1 minimum, 2 probably, for the rest of the years we do this for a living, because it's pretty clear in the NFL now. 2 quarterbacks get you to a Super Bowl. A superstar, there's 6. Stafford, Allen, whoever, Mahomes. Or a really talented young guy on a rookie contract. That's it. That's the only thing that gets in. So good guys getting paid handsomely, Kirk Cousins, Dak, Tua, you can't pay Tua. So I think Tua will be on the market, and there'll be a team that's like, listen, we're stacked everywhere else, or competency gets rewarded. Kirk Cousins has made more money than Tom Brady playing quarterback. Competency plus, and that's what Dak and Kirk are. Competency plus gets paid in every business.
For sure. I mean, I think Houston's a good example. They go, we got the young quarterback who actually might be a top 5 guy, all chips in the middle of the table.
Yeah.
All of our chips are in the middle of the table. And one of my takes last week was like, That's kind of what all sports fans want. It's just teams to be really aggressive. I mean, look at the most popular teams over the last 20 years. The Heat, the Warriors, right? Some of those Patriot Randy Moss teams, the Dodgers, the Chiefs over the last 5 years. Like that's what we want. So I commend them for doing this. And because it's polarizing, all the you either win, or if you don't, it's a disaster. It's why the Jets last year, they went all in for Aaron Rodgers, and then it was the all-time shit show. And part of the story is it gets even crazier when you don't win once you put all your chips in the middle of the table. So, like, I think the Houston Texans, they have had one of the great 12-month stretches. I would say they lucked in a little bit, because I do think they would have taken Bryce Young if they would have had the number 1 pick. But hey, Tua went ahead Justin Herbert, and the Chargers got him. Who cares how you got the guy? You just got the guy.
Right.
And now they have a chance. That division's a little wonky, right? The Jags have a lot going on, a lot of pressure on Trevor Lawrence. The Titans that have no quarterback. Colts. I was actually peeking at the TV today when the NFL Network was replaying that. Anthony Richardson, when he was healthy in this Rams game,
oh my God,
good. He looked pretty talented. So they just got to keep him on the field. He's pretty intriguing. I was like, God, I kind of forgot about this guy. But I think they're trying to throw their hat in the ring, right, with the Ravens, with the Chiefs, and just give themselves a chance. Now, this also, part of being a great player in any sport, or being successful in anything in life, it's not just about one hit or just one solid year of sales. Like, can you do it year in, year out? There is just a lot of pressure on. Everyone's gunning for you now. You're not sneaking up on anybody. Everyone's studying your tape a little harder. It's no longer, we're playing the tape. No, they're doing deep dives on you in the off season, how to stop you. So I'm fascinated to watch this Texans team, how they kind of handle it, because talent is not going to be their issue.
John Middlekauff, as always, on a Sunday night, buddy. Great seeing you.
See you, Colin.